Hello everyone! Today we're going to be discussing Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed and focus on the pros and cons of both banking and problem-posing education, in addition to the applications of each in the real world.
Paulo Freire was a Brazilian philosopher raised in the poverty of the Great Depression. He was very committed to the concept of liberating education and decided to work as a teacher, teaching underclass peasants and illiterate sugarcane workers to read and write.
Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed discusses two very different methods of education, banking and problem posing. In what ways are the two systems of education valuable, and how can they be applied in the real world? The banking concept method of education is valuable in the sense that it instills background and factual information in large quantities, but it leaves little room for inquiry and processing by the student. Problem-posing education takes the background information provided by the banking concept and builds upon it by applying the information to real-world experiences, which allows students to develop greater critical thinking skills through discussion with teachers and peers.
The banking concept is utilized in the traditional education system. The students memorize, store, and repeat the information that they are taught. The educators use lectures and readings to get the factual content in the students' brains. The students are then tested through multiple choice questions where there are right and wrong answers. Freire states on page 177 that banking concepts turn the students into receptacles to be filled by the teacher.
Sarah Miles, a senior English teacher at Sandpoint High School, would agree that the banking concept is needed in a student's education, as she says in her interview. Lecture classes are a part of education, and there is just some information that needs to be memorized.
In the banking concept, there are many cons to the student's ability to learn through this method. The students are there only to obtain what is given and not question the choices made. Freire states on page 179, it follows logically from the banking notation of consciousness that the educator's role is to regulate the way the world enters into the students.
The people who are able to succeed most in their careers are the ones who are able to play the game in their education careers. The education system is set up in one way, to gain the information and be tested if it was learned and move on. This leads everyone to not obtain the information but to only memorize it, states Alison Candle. This is a great example of how the educator expects nothing from the students except to know the information given.
There are definitely classes that you just have to memorize a lot of information for. That's just a part of being in college, states Julie Smith. Whitehead's Romance stage of education is closely related to the banking concept because it is just meant to provide a starting basis of knowledge. On page 174, he states, there is a general knowledge of the groundwork of fact and theory. The enlightenment comes from the precise knowledge that can now be understood. In problem-posing education, students gain knowledge through developing critical thinking skills. They learn to reflect and become active participants in learning by asking questions and having dialogue with the teacher and peers. Freire wrote that in problem-posing education, people develop the power to perceive critically the way they exist in the world with which and in which they find themselves. They come to see the world not as a static reality, but as a reality in process, in transformation.
Dr. Faith Hansen, an English teacher at Sage International School, would agree with the problem-posing method, as in her interview she says, I think critical education is important, education that pushes us to be critical thinkers we need to be, which is why I love teaching at Sage, because I feel like I can have those kinds of conversations and those same modes of inquiry that I would have in college classrooms.
There are some cons that come along with the problem-posing method of education. This method becomes less effective when there are more students in the classroom. Students tend to feel uncomfortable engaging in the course when the number of students is high, and it is harder for students to be able to develop a personal relationship with their educator.
In an interview with Natalie, an elementary school teacher, she agreed that there are some downsides to the problem-posing method of education. She stated that discussion-based classes only work with smaller groups. When there are too many people, people are quieter and don't talk as much, and some people don't participate at all.
These benefits can help a student when preparing projects, in the workplace, and in personal relationships. Freire claims that this method of education pertains to our understanding of reality. He promotes an emergence of consciousness and critical intervention in reality rather than a submersion of consciousness, 182. This means a person would be more apt to respond to life's challenges due to their increased perception.
While the banking concept of education has its pitfalls because it creates a power dynamic between student and teacher and disallows students from independent thinking, it is useful for laying a foundation of knowledge that problem posing later builds upon, enabling the student to think critically and apply their knowledge to real-world experiences.
In what ways can we apply both problem-posing and banking education in the same class?
Created using Powtoon.